Chapter 38, called Breach, from the Green Ember. Heather didn't know what to do, so she stayed in Light Hall a little while. Master Luth wouldn't say where Smalls has gone and advised her strongly against following him. She knelt on the floor and watched as he carefully inlaid a small pane of colored glass, sealed it in place, then began work on the next. Slowly, the middle image of the mended wood began to take better shape. As she watched, her fears about her family, about the whole wounded world, diminished. Master Luth's touch was tender, his eyes keen, and his work was splendid. As awful as the ninth window was, with its terrifying depiction of the burning of the great wood and the horrors of the after-terrors, the 10th was picturing a reversal. She was seeing the other side of the tragedy, the world that lived for now only in the hopeful hearts of those who, though not seeing, saw. She gazed and was glad, and the topmost picture pleased her the most. There stood King Jupiter Smalls, the green ember blazing on his crown and wreathed flames. He looked noble, strong, and glad. He looked like himself, she realized. It was an image of what he would be when his day came. She longed for that day. She'd been wrong when she assumed Finbar Smalls was his father. His father was King Jupiter. Finally, she left Light Hall, finding a bench in King's Garden. She sat and thought through her journey, everything she could remember that Smalls had said or Uncle Wilfred had said about Smalls. She shook her head. Everything made sense now, or almost everything. Then a seed of worry sprouted in her mind. She needed to find Uncle Wilfred and tell him that Smalls was gone. She rose and walked quickly through the corridor, into a hallway round, and outside onto the village green. She found Uncle Wilfred and Pickett going through some exercises together with wooden swords, both laughing. "Hello, my dear," Uncle Wilfred said, just blocking a sneaky stab from Pickett. When he saw her face and motioned for Pickett to wait. "What is it, Heather?" "I know," she said. "I now know everything." And he nodded. Pickett was pleased. He'd been encouraged by the assembly, heartened to carry on his work. He wanted to keep believing no matter what Master Helmer said. He enjoyed practicing swords with Uncle Wilfred the few chances he got. He was getting better, and he liked that his uncle saw it. Uncle Wilfred was a lot quicker with praise than Helmer, and much slower to anger and scorn. Pickett had just jabbed at Uncle Wilfred and almost made contact. He saw Heather out of the corner of his eye, but kept up the attack. He hoped he could score a point while she was watching. But Uncle Wilfred signaled a stop, and Heather said, I know everything." Uncle Wilfred nodded. "You know what?" asked Pickett. Before Heather could answer, screams of terror filled the air. Pickett looked past Heather and saw rabbits running, grabbing children, fleeing for the village. Scattered soldiers made for the hallway round. Uncle Wilfred tossed aside his wooden sword and refastened his belt and scabbard. Pickett did the same, his nervous fingers failing to secure the belt for several tries before finally fastening on his sword. Now the fleeing rabbits were running past them toward the village. "Wolves," they were screaming, "wolves inside." Uncle Wilfred spoke fast. "I want you both to go to the caves past the village. Hide out there." "I'm coming with you," said Pickett. "You can't, Pickett, not yet. Heather, where's Smalls?" "He left. He went to help his mother to a place he called Exile Glen," she said. "With, I don't know," she said, fear and confusion filling her. "He said he wasn't going alone." "Okay, stay in the caves," he said. "If I make it back, I'll find you there. But I'm sure you understand that I have to find Smalls." She nodded. "What's going on?" Pickett shouted. "Stay with your sister, Uncle Wilfred. Yes, do your duty. I'm trusting you." "Kyle," Heather shouted. "He might be going with Kyle." Uncle Wilfred stopped and spun around. "Did he say that?" "No, but I think it's likely." Uncle Wilfred looked furious. Who could have told him he could trust that rogue, he said, and then he tore off toward the danger, drawing his sword. Heather gasped and put her hand to her mouth. "I don't understand," Heather said. "Pickett, what is going on?" "Pickett," she said, panicked, "I think I might have helped betray Jupiter's heir." "What?" "I'll explain when I can," she shouted. She ran toward the danger, toward hallway round and the wolves inside the mountain. "We have to get to Small's quarters. There might be something important there. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands." They ran, dodging rabbits in flight, and made it to the door. It was open, and screams poured out of it like water from a spout. They heard the fierce, horrifying growls of wolves, the sound of snapping jaws and scraping steel and stone. They hesitated a moment in front of the door. Pickett, his sword bared, looked at Heather. "Is it worth it?" he shouted above the terrifying noise. "It might mean everything," she called back. He nodded, then leaped into the doorway. Heather followed, trying to think faster than the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Hallway round was a nightmare of confusion. Soldiers stood by the blast powder kegs, ready to destroy the stairway blocking entrance. But rabbits were everywhere. Wolves attacked in fury all over. One wolf snapped at a knot of rabbit soldiers who fought back hard. Pickett could see they were overmatched. Across the round, 2 farmers and 2 soldiers desperately resisted the advancing of a hulking charcoal wolf, armed with a shield and a long, many-spiked javelin. His stabs were death. Dead and wounded rabbits lined the door. Uncle Wilfred had already made it through. Heather tried to focus, ignoring the fear. It was a long way to Small's quarters. "It won't get any better," Pickett said. "We have to go," he shouted, running for the corridor. Passing by an intense fight, he joined several soldiers as they pushed back a snapping, furious wolf. There was a sharp horn blast, and all the wolves perked up. They howled, growled, and made a furious advance, one coming inches from catching Pickett's head in his jaws. Then they all fell back quickly, heading for the way out. You see? The stunned rabbit soldiers slumped, breathed heavily, then cautiously chased after the wolves. Many of the soldiers were from different citadels, and they fought hard and bravely side by side. Pickett and Heather followed the vanguard of the bravest who charged after the retreating wolves. They reached King's Garden, tried not to notice the destruction and violence that had occurred there moments before, and ran down the great stone stairs, taking them by fours and barely staying upright. They reached the bottom and shot off through the stone corridors, colliding with terrified rabbits, bloody wounded rabbits, jumpy, sword-swinging rabbits with looks of terror on their faces. After a few winding turns, they made it to the hallway where Small's room was. As they got closer, they saw that the door was open. Pickett ran ahead. His sword was ready. He didn't stop when he reached the door. He dodged inside with a cry. A startled rabbit cried out in surprise, spun around, and dropped the wooden box he'd been holding. "Kyle, what are you doing?" Heather shouted. The room had been ransacked, and he was alone. "Heather," he said, shrugging nervously, "I was looking for something to keep it safe during the attack." Heather crossed the room and picked up the box Kyle had dropped. "You liar," she shouted. She opened the box, but found only papers inside. "What did you do?" she pleaded with him. "Kyle, where is he?" "I did wrong, Heather," he said, shivering and shaking, rubbing his hands together. "I made a deal and he's gone. He's finished. I'm sorry." Heather screamed. Pickett bounced back and forth on the balls of his feet. He was confused, but he had decided to back Heather up, whatever came. "Where is he now, Kyle?" she said, her voice strained. "Where is Jupiter Smalls, son of the betrayed and murdered king, keeper of the green ember and rightful heir to the throne?" She was screaming at him. Pickett was stunned. "Jupiter Smalls? Jupiter Smalls?" Kyle slumped before Heather's withering state and sat in a crumpled mess in the corner. "He is betrayed," he said, "by me." "Where? Where is the green ember?" she shouted. "Where is Smalls?" "He must have it. I advised him to leave it here. I had hoped I could get it after he was gone so it wouldn't go to Morbin." "Morbin?" Heather asked. "You've betrayed him to Morbin Blackhawk?" She was furious. She slapped him. Pickett came behind her, his sword poised. "Yes," said Kyle, withering. "Indirectly. I regret it now, but I had orders from my father." "Talk, Kyle, and make it quick if there's anything of good left in you," she said. "I will, Heather. I never meant to hurt you. I always thought of you as a real friend. In fact, I had hoped you would understand my reasons." "I don't care about you or your reasons," she shouted. "I just need to know what happened." Okay, Kyle said. "I've been sneaking out at night, meeting secretly with the captain of the Wolf garrison down at Decker's Landing. I made a deal with them. They aren't enough to overwhelm this place, so I devised a plan to get Smalls away and to get this place distracted by a wolf raid while I made off with the green Ember. What about Smalls? Heather asked. He's headed for a bigger trap. Where? She asked, seething. Kyle hung his head. Where? She screamed into his face. Jupiter's Crossing, he said. At Jupiter's Crossing. The end.